purpose does the gentleman from Georgia rise?
Mr. Speaker, by direction of the Committee on Rules, I call up House Resolution 328 and ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the resolution.
House Calendar Number 48, House Resolution 328. Resolved, that upon adoption of this resolution, it shall be in order to consider in the House the joint resolution, House Joint Resolution 68, authorizing the limited use of the United States Armed Forces in support of the NATO mission in Libya, if called up by the Chair of the Committee on Foreign Affairs or her designee. All points of order against consideration of the joint resolution are waived. The joint resolution shall be considered as read. All points of order against provisions in the joint resolution are waived. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the joint resolution to final passage without intervening motion except 1 hour of debate with 40 minutes equally divided and controlled by the Chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Foreign Affairs, and 20 minutes equally divided and controlled by the Chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Armed Services, and 2, one motion to recommit. Section 2. Upon adoption of this resolution, it shall be in order to consider in the House the bill, H.R. 2278, to limit the use of funds appropriated to the Department of Defense for United States Armed Forces in support of North Atlantic Treaty Organization Operation Unified Protector with respect to Libya, unless otherwise specifically authorized by law, if called up by the Chair of the Committee on Armed Services or his designee. All points of order against consideration of the bill are waived. The bill shall be considered as read. All points of order against provisions in the bill are waived. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the bill to final passage without intervening motion except 1 hour of debate equally divided and controlled by Chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Armed Services, and 2, one motion to recommit.
The gentleman from Georgia is recognized for 1 hour.
Mr. Speaker, for the purpose of debate only, I yield the customary 30 minutes to the gentlelady from New York, Ms. Slaughter, pending which I yield myself such time as I may consume. During consideration of this resolution, all time is yielded for the purpose of debate only.
And the gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Speaker, House Resolution 328 provides a closed rule for consideration of H.R. 2278 and H.J. Res. 68. The rule provides a total of 3 hours of debate in this chamber on this vitally important issue of U.S. military operations in Libya. The rule also provides the minority with 2 separate motions to recommit, with or without instructions. Mr. Speaker, it was in this week in 1788, June 21st of 1788, that the United States ratified its Constitution, that Constitution that still serves us so well today. And in that Constitution, our framers made clear that the power of the purse belongs here and here alone, here in the People's House, here on Capitol Hill. And that Constitution made clear that the power to declare war lies here and here alone. On June 3rd of this year, by a vote of 268 to 145, the House of Representatives passed a resolution asking the President to make clear what his intentions are in Libya, asking the President to come and consult with Congress, to get Congress's permission to seek our authority to prosecute those hostilities in Libya. We've received some information from the White House since then. We've gotten a letter from the White House since then. We even have classified documents since then. But what we have not had since then, Mr. Speaker, is an opportunity for the American people to make their voice heard on this important issue. Because after all, this isn't an issue for Congress. Because as a congressman, it's not about my voice. It's about the voice of the 911,000 people back home that I represent, that I bring here to Congress. And those people's voice have yet to be heard on this Libya issue. Operation Odyssey Dawn, in full operation now since the month of March, and the people's voice has still not been heard. But today, Mr. Speaker, the Rules Committee, as one of the longest standing committees in this U.S. House of Representatives, first constituted in 1789, The Rules Committee is making that opportunity available with these two resolutions. Mr. Speaker, my hope is that the people's voice will be heard today, that in these hour upon hour of debate that we have today, these two very different choices for where this country goes, that the American people will, for the first time, have their voice heard on the question of Libya. As you know, Mr. Speaker, when we come back in July, we're going to take up the FY 2012 defense bill. In fact, we'll take it up tonight and start considering amendments when we return. We'll again have an opportunity to have our voice heard because, Mr. Speaker, there is an entire gradation of options that we have here. Are we going to declare war on Libya? Are we going to allow the President to continue what he's doing in Libya? Are we going to shut down the funding for troops on the ground in Libya? Are we going to shut down funding for Libya altogether? These are the questions that the Rules Committee has made available today and next week, 2 weeks from now, that this House will be able to have its voice heard. And with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Georgia reserves. For what purpose? Gentleman from New York rise.
To bring up the bill, I ask unanimous consent that I may consume such time as I need. And
gentlewoman is recognized.
Appreciate it. First, I want to thank my colleague very much for yielding the time. Mr. Speaker, we're considering matters of war and peace today. On Sunday, our nation will have been engaged in military action in Libya for 100 days. The actions taken by the President have a grave impact on the constitutional role of Congress and the role of the United States abroad. Taken together, these are among the most important issues that we, as members of Congress, will ever consider. These are the very debates that scholars and historians will study and analyze for decades to come. Given these fundamental issues, the American people deserve the full and thorough consideration that should be afforded to all legislation introduced into the body, with committee hearings and debate, followed by an open and regular process and a thoughtful debate by the whole House. In 1990, when I was first here, the body considered a resolution regarding the matters of war and peace. At the request of President George H.W. Bush, both chambers of the United States Congress engaged in a fierce debate about whether to authorize the use of military force in the Persian Gulf. I have vivid memories of those debates long ago into the night, with the issues being debated in committees, marked up by both parties, brought to the House floor for final debate before the American public. And on that particular measure concerning the Persian Gulf, we had 25 hours of debate and 263 members spoke. It was one of the most thorough airing of our constitutional obligations that I have witnessed. In exchanges that can only be publicly accessed and viewed today, members of the House and our colleagues in the Senate engaged in an intelligent and enlightening exchange of ideas about the merits, the dangers, necessities of passing a resolution authorizing American troops to engage in military force overseas. There were strong views on both sides of the aisle, but the views were accompanied by an overriding sense of duty to our country, a belief that Congress would reach a decision based upon the thoughtful and prudent votes of its members and a reflection of the common interest of all its citizens. As historians look back on the debate over the Persian Gulf War, they can clearly see a vibrant democracy. A democracy that is engaged in robust debate, and a democracy earnestly working together for the best interest of its people. 2 decades later, we stand in a room that's imbued with this history. That debate took place right here. But we avoid the robust debates that preceded us here today. Indeed, the way in which today's measures are being debated shame the dignity, history, and tradition of this body. Today's resolutions about our actions in Libya have been rushed through the House of Representatives. They were written behind closed doors, received neither committee hearings nor committee markups. The 2 resolutions being considered on a single closed rule, following an emergency meeting of the Rules Committee yesterday afternoon. The process by which these measures proceeded through the Rules Committee is indicative of the chaotic and rushed process that we're being asked to vote for here today. Late Tuesday night, 10 o'clock, I believe, we were given 2 resolutions for an emergency meeting on Wednesday. They were added as emergency items to our afternoon meeting, but when we got to the Rules Committee, they had been pulled from the agenda. It wasn't until 9 p.m. Wednesday that we received the text of H.R. 2278. Yesterday, we were notified that the Rules Committee would meet on this new and unvetted bill along with one of the original 2 resolutions less than 3 hours before the meeting began. We now stand on the House floor being asked to vote for a closed rule. We will then be asked to consider 2 resolutions of historic proportions with no ability to shape and adjust the measures to reflect the true will of the House. Mr. Speaker, I really regret the shameful way this important debate has been rushed through Congress, and I apologize to future generations who will look back on the work that we're doing today to try to understand the time. Quite simply, the legislative process matters. Historians, scholars, and yes, future members of Congress will look back at our actions today to see how their forebears shaped the fate of this country. In the case of the resolution of the Persian Gulf, they'll see how our democratic process thrived, whether one agreed with the resolution or did not. Shamefully, in the case of today's resolutions, they will see a dysfunctional democratic process, one that has committed a disservice to the American people, to the dignity of the House of Representatives and the future of the United States, by avoiding a true debate on one of the most important issues of our time. For these very reasons, I urge my colleagues to vote no on today's rule and reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady from New York reserves. Gentleman from Georgia.
Mr. Speaker, at this time I'm pleased to yield 3 minutes to a gentleman who has great reverence for the United States Constitution, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Paul.
Gentleman is recognized for 3 minutes.